My name is George Lost. I carry a badge that feels heavier every year, serving as the sheriff of Daggerlin, Ohio, a town mostly composed of rust and bad memories clinging to the edge of Lake Erie. I was sitting in my cruiser on the shoulder of Route 6, watching the rain dissolve the gravel shoulder, just wanting the clock to hit 6 a.m. so I could go home and forget the smell of wet asphalt. Then the radio clicked. It wasn't the dispatcher. It was a sound like dry leaves skittering across concrete, followed by a voice that sounded too tight, too high. It was Deputy Miller. "Sheriff, you need to get to the Granger property now." That was the hook. The tone wasn't panic. Panic I can handle. Panic is normal. This was confusion. Deep, primal confusion. I put the cruiser in gear. The tires spun on the slick mud before catching the pavement. Daggerlin isn't the kind of place you pass through. It's the kind of place you get stuck in. The steel mills died 30 years ago, leaving behind skeletons of iron that groan when the wind comes off the lake. Everything here is covered in a fine film of grit, a gray patina that dulls the colors of the cars, the houses, and the people. We deal with domestics, odds, and the occasional bar fight at the Iron Lung. We don't deal with mysteries. Not usually. But there are rules to this town that aren't in the state penal code. Rules you learn by watching the shadows stretch a little too far at sunset, or by listening to the way the lake laps against the shore when there is no wind. Rule 1, if the dogs start barking at the water, you go inside and lock the door. I pulled up to the Granger house. It was a small siding peeled ranch that looked like it was exhaling slowly into the ground. The flashing lights of Miller's cruiser painted the wet grass in strobes of blue and red. Miller was standing by the back porch. He's a good kid, respectful, clean uniform. But right now, he looked like he'd seen a car crash in slow motion. He was pale, his skin reflecting the erratic light like wax. "Where is she?" I asked. I slammed the car door. The sound was a flat thud that didn't echo. "Gone, Sheriff," Miller said. He pointed toward the lake. "Just gone." Mrs. Granger was on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket that looked too thin for the biting April chill. She wasn't crying. She was rocking back and forth, eyes wide, staring at a spot in the darkness where the yard ended and the black expanse of Erie began. She looked like a puppet with cut strings. I walked past her. I didn't ask questions, not yet. I needed to see the ground. The ground doesn't lie. People lie. People forget. The mud remembers everything. "Show me," I said. Miller led me into the backyard. The grass was tall, dead from the winter, yellow stalks matted down by the rain. The beam of my flashlight cut a cone through the mist. It landed on the mud near the swing set. "Here," Miller whispered. Footprints small, size 3, maybe 4. Sneakers with a distinctive tread. Little stars on the heels, Samantha Granger, 8 years old. The tracks were deep. She had been running. The spacing between them was wide. The toe impressions dug in hard, kicking up sprays of dirt behind them. I followed the line. Step, step, step. They led straight toward the water. The lake was about 50 yards from the house, down a gentle slope of rocky soil and scrub brush. The smell hit me then, not just the fishy funk of the lake, but something sharper. Ozone, like the air after a lightning strike, but stale cold. "Where do they go, Miller?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the tracks. "That is the thing, George," he said, forgetting rank. "They don't." We reached the edge of the slope. The ground here was soft, saturated by the rising water table. The mud was like chocolate pudding, thick, sucking, wet, a perfect canvas. The tracks continued, left, right, and then nothing. I stopped. I shone the light forward. The mud was pristine, smooth, unbroken. I shone the light back. The trail of small sneaker prints was clear. a jagged scar in the earth. I looked at the last two prints. The left foot was planted firmly, the right foot was mid-stride. The toe dug deep as if pushing off for the next step. But there was no next step. 6 feet away, the water of Lake Erie lapped gently against the stones. Fish! Asterisk, I crouched down. My knees popped. I felt the cold dampness seep through my trousers instantly. Did she jump? I asked. Though I knew the answer. 6 feet, Sheriff. Miller's voice trembled. From a standing start in deep mud. An Olympic athlete couldn't make that jump without leaving a launch mark. Look at the prints. There is no skid, no slip. He was right. The prints were clean. She hadn't slipped. She hadn't been dragged. There were no other footprints. No adult boot marks coming to grab her. No tire tracks. No paw prints. It was as if gravity had simply ceased to apply to Samantha Granger mid-step. As if the sky had reached down and plucked her up like a weed. I shone the light out over the water. It was black, opaque, swallowing the beam. The surface was disturbingly calm. Usually, Erie is choppy, restless. Tonight, it looked like a sheet of obsidian. Check the water, I said. Get the drag line. I did, Miller said. I waded out, 10 feet. It's shallow here. Knee deep. The bottom is silt. If she fell in, there'd be disturbance. The silt takes hours to settle. It's clear, George, crystal clear. I stood up. The wind picked up, whistling through the dead reeds. It sounded like a flute being played by someone with no breath. I looked at the footprints again, that abrupt stop. It was offensive to the senses. It violated the physics of the world I tried to keep order in. Don't look at the water too long, I muttered. What rule for? I said, mostly to myself. Don't stare at the reflection of the moon. There is no moon tonight, Sheriff, Miller said. I looked up. He was right. The sky was a heavy bruised purple, thick with clouds. Secure the scene, I said, turning away from the impossible termination of the tracks. Tape it off. Wide perimeter. Nobody walks near those prints. I want casts of them. And Miller, yeah. Don't let Mrs. Granger come down here. She doesn't need to see that the world just ended for her daughter. I walked back toward the cruiser, my boots making heavy sucking sounds in the mud. Faithuk tuck. Asterisk, the air tasted metallic. I felt a headache pushing behind my eyes, a pressure change like being deep underwater. This wasn't a kidnapping. I knew the smell of a kidnapping. This was something else. This was Daggerlin waking up. I reached the porch and looked back one last time. Miller's flashlight was a lonely beacon in the dark. From this distance, the footprints looked like a sentence that had been cut off mid-word. I keyed my radio. Dispatch, this is lost. Go ahead, Sheriff. Notify the Coast Guard. Tell them we have a missing child, possible drowning. I lied. It wasn't a drowning. You leave ripples when you drown. Copy that. I leaned against the hood of the car, the metal cold against my palms. I stared at the dark water. Something out there rippled, not near the shore, far out. A disturbance in the black glass. It wasn't a wave, it was a shape. Then, just as quickly, the lake went still again. My hand drifted to my holster, thumbing the strap. A useless gesture. You can't shoot a disappearance. You can't handcuff a void. I took a breath of the wet, rusted air. Here we go, I whispered. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The silence that followed Miller's disappearance wasn't empty. It was heavy. It pressed against the windows of the station, thick with humidity and the smell of impending rain. For 2 days, Daggerlin Lake was just a lake, dark, flat, innocent. We dragged it. We ran sonar grids. Nothing, just silt, old tires, and the skeletal remains of trees that had died 50 years ago. Then the radio crackled. Thursday, 4:18 p.m. Dispatch to sheriff. We have a 10 to 74 at the Maddox residence. Joshua Maddox, age 8. My stomach dropped. Not a twist, just a heavy leaden thud. I grabbed my keys. David Maddox was waiting for me at the trailhead, near Palmer's Bluff. He was a big man, a mechanic who spent his life wrestling transmissions, but he looked small now. His face was pale, his hands shaking so bad the flashlight he was holding rattled against his belt buckle. "He went for a ride, George," David said. His voice was thin, cracking just down the trail. "He knows not to go near the water," I told him. "We'll find him, Dave," I said. The lie tasted like copper. "Stay behind me." The trail to the bluff is narrow, a deer path that winds through scrub oak and pine before dumping you out onto a stretch of rocky shoreline. The air down there is different. It smells of rot and wet iron. The ground was slick with mud, the kind that sucks at your boots and tries to pull you down. We found the bike first, a red Schwinn lying on its side. The front wheel was still spinning, a slow, hypnotic rotation. "Fake click click, asterisks, Josh," David screamed. The sound tore out of his throat, raw and jagged. "Quiet," I hissed, holding up a hand. I heard it then, not a cry for help, a whimper, a low rhythmic sound, like a dog that's been kicked. We pushed through the last of the brush. The shoreline opened up, gray water lapping at gray stones, and there he was. Josh was standing ankle deep in the muck, about 20 yards out. He wasn't moving. He was rigid, his arms pinned to his sides, like a soldier at attention. He was facing the lake. "Josh." David surged forward. I grabbed his jacket, hauling him back. "Wait. That's my son, George. Let me go. Look at him," I said, my voice hard. "Look at his feet." David stopped. He looked. Josh wasn't standing in the mud. He was sinking into it. But he wasn't struggling. He was paralyzed and staring at something in the water, about 10 feet in front of the boy. The surface of the lake was bulging. It wasn't a wave, it was a displacement. Something large was rising from the silt. It broke the surface with a wet, sucking sound. Fish, luck. Asterisk. I've seen drowned bodies. I've seen bears with mange. This was neither. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and sleek. Its skin was a deep, oily black, slick like wet rubber or polished obsidian. It had the general shape of a man, but the proportions were wrong. The arms were too long, ending in hands that hung below its knees. The shoulders were narrow, sloping down into a torso that looked segmented, like the carapace of a beetle. It didn't breathe. It just stood there. The water waste. High, glistening in the dying light, David made a sound, a choked sob. The thing turned its head. It didn't possess a face in the way we understand it. No nose, no ears, just 2 patches of lighter gray where eyes should be, flat and dead like dirty glass. And a mouth. The mouth was a horizontal slit that stretched too wide, curving up at the edges, a fixed, rigid grin. It wasn't smiling because it was happy. It was smiling because that was how its face was cut. It took a step toward Josh. The motion was fluid, frictionless. It didn't splash. It just cut through the water. Instinct took over. I drew my service revolver. The weight of the steel felt good, familiar, a tool of logic in a world gone mad. "Step away from the boy," I shouted. My voice sounded tiny against the vastness of the lake. The thing stopped. It tilted its head, like a bird listening to a worm underground. The grin didn't change. It took another step. A hand, long and black, reached out toward Josh's shoulder. I didn't think. I fired. Fabang asterisk. The shot echoed off the bluffs, a sharp crack that silenced the birds. The bullet hit the creature in the chest. I saw the impact, a ripple in the black flesh. like a stone hitting thick mud. There was no blood, no stagger. Just a dull, wet faith. The creature paused. It looked down at its chest. "David, grab him," I yelled, racking the hammer back. David scrambled into the mud, splashing toward his son. The creature looked back up at me. The gray patches on its face seemed to sharpen. It raised a hand to its chest, to the spot where the .38 round had struck. It tapped the spot, one long black finger. "Fey tap. Tap asterisk." It was mocking me. I fired again, 2 shots. Fey bang, bang. Asterisk, one hit the shoulder, the other center mass again. The wet Fey again. The flesh absorbed the kinetic energy like it was nothing more than a raindrop. The creature didn't even flinch. It just stood there, grinning that impossible grin. Observing the physics of my violence fail, David reached Josh, scooping the boy up into his arms. He turned, his boots slipping on the slick stones, and scrambled back toward the tree line. The creature watched them go. It didn't pursue. It didn't scream. It just turned its gaze back to me. For a second, the world narrowed down to that smile. I felt a coldness in my chest that had nothing to do with the weather. It was the realization of absolute obsolescence. My badge, my gun, my authority. None of it meant anything to this thing. I was a gnat shouting at a hurricane. The creature slowly lowered its arm. It took a step backward, then another. It moved in reverse, sliding back into the depths. The water rose up to its chest, its neck, its chin. The last thing to disappear was the grin. It sank beneath the surface without a ripple. The lake went smooth again. I stood there, my gun still raised, smoke drifting from the barrel, the smell of sulfur mixed with the rot of the lake. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird from the woods behind me. I heard David weeping, a low, broken sound. I lowered the gun. My hand was shaking. I looked at the dark water, at the reflection of the gray sky on the surface. It looked like a lid on a coffin. I holstered the weapon. It felt lighter now, useless. Dispatch. I whispered into the radio on my shoulder, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "Dispatch, we found him." I didn't mention the grin. I didn't know how to write that in a report. There isn't a code for something that laughs at bullets. Asterisk, 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 the paperwork was the easy part. The paperwork had lines, boxes, and defined margins. It asked for time of death, location of recovery, and cause. I wrote Fey accidental drowning Fey in the box for the cause. The ink didn't smudge. It sat there, black and absolute, a small anchor of logic in a world that had suddenly lost its floor. I didn't write about the grin. I didn't write about the way the water seemed to recoil from the body, or how David's friend, whose name was Michael, I had to remind myself, not just the body, had looked like he'd been submerged for weeks, not hours. We got the town hall meeting set up for Tuesday night. The gymnasium at the high school smelled like floor wax and damp wool. 300 people crammed into folding chairs that hadn't been replaced since the 80s. The air was thick with the heat of bodies and the murmur of frightened, angry gossip. I stood at the podium. The microphone feedback whined, a high-pitched drill against the eardrum. I tapped it, thump, thump. "Curfew is 8 o'clock, I said. My voice sounded flat, amplified and distorted by the cheap speakers. "No exceptions. If you are on the road, you will be escorted home. If you are on the water, you will be arrested." The room erupted shouts about rights, about fishing season, about the economy. I let them yell. I watched their faces. They were red, sweaty, alive. They were angry at me, and that was good. Anger is a focused emotion. Fear is messy. Fear makes you open doors you shouldn't. "This is for your safety," I repeated, over and over, like a scratched record. I felt like a parent telling children not to touch the stove, except the stove was a black lake that ate people and laughed about it. After the meeting, the station felt like a tomb. The silence pressed against the windows. My deputies, Miller and Kowalski, sat at their desks, pretending to work. They had seen things too. Shadows that moved against the wind. Ripples where there were no fish. I went down to the archives. It was a glorified closet in the basement, smelling of mildew and the slow chemical breakdown of paper. The single bulb overhead buzzed. A dying insect trapped in glass. I pulled the boxes from 1908. That was the year the dam was built. The year the valley was flooded to make the lake. The logs were bound in cracked leather. The pages were stiff, crinkled from old moisture. The handwriting was a tight spiked cursive, penned by a sheriff named Halloway. Asterisk the 14th of October, 1908. Incident at the waterline, asterisk the 16th of October, 1908. 2 men missing from the work crew. Asterisk the 19th of October, 1908. Fire on the water. Asterisk I traced the line with my finger. Fay fire on the water. Asterisk not a boat fire. Halloway described cold flames, blue and silent, dancing on the surface tension. He described men walking into the lake as if called. He didn't use the word grin, but he wrote about their faces being slack yet joyous. I closed the book. The dust motes dancing in the light looked like tiny drowning stars. Halloway had lost 6 men that year. He'd listed them as industrial accidents. The lie wasn't new. It was an inheritance. I went back upstairs. Miller looked up, his eyes rimmed with red. He was holding his radio like a lifeline. Dispatch says Mrs. Gable saw something in her yard, Miller said. Says it looked like a man, but long. Write it up, I said. I grabbed a marker and a blank sheet of paper. I taped it to the whiteboard behind the dispatch desk. I wrote, Fay code 847, asterisk. What is that? Kowalski asked, looking up from his coffee. That is the code, I said. For the things we don't put in the official reports, if you see lights under the water, that is an 847. If you see a deer standing on its hind legs watching you, that is an 847. If you hear your own voice calling for help from the woods, you radio an 847 and you drive the other way. Miller stared at the board. Does it? Does having a code help? It organizes the chaos. I lied. It gives us a procedure. We contain it. We document it. We survive it. They nodded. They needed the ritual. They needed to believe that if they could categorize the horror, they could control it. I didn't tell them that Code 847 was just a bucket for the impossible, a way to keep us from screaming over the open channel. I took the cruiser out at midnight. The town was dark, huddled under the curfew like a child under a blanket. The streetlights cast long, sickly pools of yellow on the wet pavement. I drove slowly, checking locks, checking shadows. I ended up at the boat launch. The gravel crunched under the tires, loud in the stillness. I killed the engine. I killed the lights. The lake was a sheet of black glass. The moon was hidden behind a thick, bruised layer of clouds. I rolled the window down an inch. The smell hit me instantly. Wet earth, rotting vegetation, and that faint, metallic tang of ozone. I sat there, hand on the grip of my shotgun, listening for 20 minutes. There was nothing but the wind hissing through the pines. Then, it started Faith Hump. Asterisk it came from out on the water. A dull, heavy sound, like a wooden mallet striking a hollow log. I squinted into the dark. Nothing but blackness. Thump asterisk. It was closer, rhythmic, deliberate. It wasn't mechanical. It sounded wet. Faith Hump. Asterisk I checked the radio. The green light of the display was the only comfort in the cab. I thought about calling it in. Fay dispatch. I have a code 847 at the marina. Asterisk, but I didn't. I just sat there, breathing shallow breaths, watching the invisible line where the water met the shore. Faithump. Asterisk, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was a heavy, expectant silence. The kind of silence that happens right before a predator strikes. I waited for the grin. I waited for the pale face to break the surface. Instead, the radio crackled. Static washed over the cabin, loud and harsh. Then, through the white noise, a voice, my voice. Asterisk's dispatch. Asterisk, the radio said, in a tone that was perfectly terrifyingly mine. Asterisk's dispatch. We found him. Asterisk. I stared at the handset. I hadn't touched the button. Asterisks, I didn't mention the grin. Asterisk, my voice said from the speaker, looping, distorting. Asterisks, I didn't mention the grin. I didn't mention the grin. Asterisk, I turned the radio off. My hand was trembling again. Out on the lake, something large broke the surface with a wet, sliding sound, and then slipped back down. I put the car in reverse and backed away, the gravel popping like gunfire under the wheels. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Rule number 1 of the new world. Never look back. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I didn't stop until I hit the blacktop of Route 9. My hands were gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles looked like polished bone. The radio was silent again, just the low rhythmic hum of the cruiser's engine. But the smell of the lake lingered in the cabin. It was a wet, metallic tang, like pennies left in a cup of water for a week. I checked the dashboard clock, 11:42 p.m. Curfew was strict in this town. 11 o'clock sharp. We didn't have bells, and we didn't have sirens. We just had the understanding that after 11, the dark didn't belong to us anymore. It belonged to the things that floated in the shallows. The radio crackled, making me jump. It wasn't my voice this time. It was dispatch. Or at least, it sounded like dispatch. You learn to listen for the cadence, the boredom in the tone. The mimics can copy the pitch, but they can never quite nail the apathy of a graveyard shift operator. Asterisks Unit 1. We have a 10 to 92 at North Beach. Motion sensors tripped near the old pier. Possible curfew violation. Asterisk real. It sounded real. Copy, dispatch, I said, my voice rougher than I wanted it to be. En route. I spun the cruiser around. The tires screeching against the asphalt. North Beach was the worst place for a breach. The currents there dragged everything into a deep pocket right by the pier. We called it the collection plate. If something washed up, it washed up there. And if something was walking out, that's where it would start. As I sped toward the coast, the temperature in the car plummeted. The heater was blasting, vents open, but I could see my breath clouding in front of the windshield. Frost began to web the corners of the glass. That was the first sign, the thermal drop. It meant the barrier was thinning. Then came the smell, stronger than before. Ozone brine, the scent of a thunderstorm trapped in a basement. It hit the back of my throat, tasting like electricity. I crested the hill overlooking North Beach and slammed on the brakes. The ocean wasn't visible. The beach wasn't visible. A wall of fog, thick and gray like dirty wool, had swallowed the entire shoreline. It didn't move like weather. It didn't drift. It sat there, heavy and solid, a bruise on the night. I killed the sirens. Sound travels differently in that soup. It amplifies, it distorts. I grabbed the heavy maglite from the passenger seat, the old kind metal heavy enough to be a baton if you needed it, and stepped out. The silence was absolute. No crickets, no wind. Just the wet, heavy stillness of the fog pressing against my eardrums. "Polis!" I shouted. The word fell flat, swallowed instantly by the gray. I walked into the mist. Visibility dropped to zero. My beam cut a cone of illuminated vapor. about 3 feet in front of me, and then terminated in nothingness. I counted my steps. Phaon, 2, 3. Asterisk, I knew the layout of the pier. I knew I had about 50 yards before the sand turned to wet rot. Facelap asterisk, I froze. It came from the left. A wet, heavy sound, like a wet towel hitting a tile floor. Facelap slap asterisk. Footsteps, bare feet on wet wood. This is the sheriff, I called out, keeping my voice level. You are in violation of curfew. Identify yourself. Is that you, George? The voice was young, male, trembling. I swung the light to the left. The beam caught a figure huddled near the rotting pylons of the pier. It was a kid, maybe 17, Letterman jacket, skinny jeans, holding a smartphone up like a shield. The screen was glowing, recording. Identify, I barked, moving closer. It is Kyle, the kid said, squinting into the light. Kyle Miller. I was just trying to get a video for the channel. People say the fog is fake. He was shivering violently. His lips were blue. Turn the phone off, Kyle, I said, reaching for his arm. We're leaving now. Wait, Kyle whispered, pulling back. He pointed the phone toward the water, into the impenetrable gray. Listen, the chat says they can hear her. Hear who? Samantha, he said. My stomach dropped. Samantha Higgins had gone into the water 3 years ago. We found her sneaker. We never found the rest of her. Kyle, that is not Samantha, I said, stepping between him and the water. The smell of ozone was so strong now, my eyes were watering. Face slap, slap, slap asterisk, more footsteps closer, and not just from one direction, they were circling. Help me, a voice called from the fog. It was faint, tinny, like it was coming through a bad speaker. Mom, it is cold, Kyle gasped. Sam, it is not her. I hissed, grabbing the collar of his jacket. It is a trick, move. But she is lost, Kyle said, resisting me. She sounds so lost. The fog swirled, agitated by something moving through it. I swept the flashlight beam across the sand. They were standing at the edge of the light. 3 of them. They weren't people. They were damp outlines, gray and translucent, like water stains on a ceiling given 3 dimensions. They wore clothes that looked heavy and sodden. A fishing vest, a summer dress, a tattered suit. Their faces were smooth, featureless blurs, like wax melting under heat. Mom, the figure in the dress said. The voice didn't come from a mouth. It vibrated from the air around it, a composite of a dozen different recordings. It is cold. The water is so cold. Kyle, run to the car, I ordered, unclipping the safety on my holster, though I knew bullets were useless. Don't look at their faces. They don't have faces, Kyle whimpered. They will if you look long enough, I said. They take what they need. The figure in the fishing vest took a step forward. Facelap asterisks George, it said. It used my voice. The same recording from the radio. Asterisk, I didn't mention the grin. Asterisk, then the figure in the suit spoke, overlapping with mine. Asterisk's code 847. Breach. Breach. Asterisk, and then Samantha's voice, weaving through them both. Asterisk, so cold. Asterisk, it wasn't a haunting. It was a playback. The lake was a hard drive, and these things were the corrupted files. A hive mind of lost memories and drowned moments, stitching themselves together to make bait run. I roared, shoving Kyle hard enough to knock the wind out of him. He scrambled up and sprinted toward the road. I backed away slowly, keeping the light trained on the trio. They didn't chase. They didn't need to. They just stood there. The fog curling around their ankles, vibrating with stolen voices. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The cold biting through my uniform, settling into the marrow of my bones. George, they said in unison. a chorus of the dead. I turned and ran. I broke rule number 1. I ran, and I didn't look back until I hit the cruiser door. I threw Kyle into the passenger seat and slammed the car into gear. As we tore away, leaving the fog bank in the rear view, Kyle was sobbing, clutching his phone. "I got it," he whispered, staring at the screen. "I got them on video." I glanced over. The screen was black. The phone was dead, battery drained. "You didn't get anything, kid," I said, my voice shaking. "The lake doesn't let you keep the evidence." I looked out at the passing dark. The fog was receding, pulling back into the water, waiting for the next breach. We were safe for tonight, but the voices, they were getting better. They were learning. They knew my name, and now they knew I was listening. ***, we drove the rest of the way in silence. The heater in the cruiser rattled, spitting out air that smelled of dust and scorched plastic, but neither of us moved to turn it down. Kyle sat curled against the passenger door, his thumb rubbing the blank screen of his phone over and over, like he was trying to clean a smudge that went all the way through the glass. Back at the station, we didn't file a report. There isn't a form for what we saw. I logged it as a civil disturbance, unfounded, same as I've done for the last 3 incidents. The chief knows. He doesn't ask, and I don't tell. That's the arrangement. It keeps the panic down, keeps the town running on a thin, brittle layer of denial. Kyle transferred out 2 days later, cited family issues up north. I didn't blame him. He was a good kid, sharp, but he had too much imagination. You can't have an imagination out here. It fills in the gaps, the dark leaves open, and the things waiting in the lake love those gaps. They feed on them. When I shook his hand in the parking lot, his grip was loose, his palm clammy. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked past me, toward the tree line, checking for fog. "Don't look back," I told him. It was the only advice that mattered. He drove off, and just like that, the roster was down to 1. The town settled into a rhythm after that. It wasn't peace. It was a kind of pressurized quiet, like the air in a room right before a window blows out. The locals stopped walking near the shoreline after dusk. The diner started closing at 8. No one talked about it, but you could see it in the way they moved. Hurried, heads down, shoulders tight. They knew the rules, even if they hadn't written them down in a notebook like I had. I realized then that this wasn't a case to be solved. There would be no arrests, no trial, no yellow tape wrapped around a crime scene. You can't handcuff a memory. You can't read rights to a reflection that smiles with too many teeth. The thing in the lake, the grin, the voices, the cold spots, it wasn't an invader. It was a feature of the landscape, permanent as the granite ridges or the deep silt bottom. It couldn't be killed. It could only be managed. My shifts changed. I stopped patrolling the highway and started parking the cruiser on the gravel bluff, overlooking the water. The long watch. That's what I call it now. It's not about protection anymore. It's about containment. It's about being the witness so no one else has to be. Tonight, the moon is obscured by a shelf of low, heavy clouds. The lake is a slab of black glass, motionless, absorbing the weak light from the solitary bulb on the pier. I'm leaning against the hood of the cruiser, a thermos of black coffee in my hand. The steam rises in a thin, gray ribbon, vanishing into the damp air. It smells like rain and wet pine needles, masking the faint, underlying scent of ozone that always heralds a breach. I check my watch, 2 o'clock. The witching hour is a myth. Out here, the bad times don't have a schedule. They happen when you blink. I take a sip of coffee. It's bitter, scalds the tongue. Good. Pain keeps you grounded, keeps you here. On the gravel instead of drifting out there with them. There's a ripple about 50 yards out, just a small disturbance, breaking the glass surface. I don't shine my spotlight. Light just attracts them, gives them a path to follow. Instead, I watch the water rearrange itself. The ripples don't spread outward like they should. They move inward, converging, building a shape. A pale patch rises from the dark water. It looks like a face, bloated and bleached, floating just beneath the surface. I don't reach for my gun. Bullets are just physics, and physics stopped applying here a long time ago. I reach for the flare gun on my belt, but I don't draw it. Not yet. That's for when they touch the shore. George, the wind whispers. It sounds like my father's voice, raspy with the Marlboros he smoked for 40 years. Come see, the water's fine. My knuckles turn white around the thermos. The mimicry is getting better. Last week it sounded like static. Tonight, it has the cadence, the pitch, the warmth. It wants me to engage. It wants a reaction. That's the food. Fear, anger, grief. It eats it all. No, I say, just that flat boring. I strip the emotion out of the word until it's just a noise. The pale shape lingers, rotating slowly. I can feel the weight of its attention. A physical pressure against my forehead, like a headache trying to drill in. It's testing the perimeter, testing me. I hold my ground. I don't step forward, and I don't step back. I just stand there, a fixed point in a shifting world. After a long minute, the shape dissolves, melting back into the soup of the lake. The ripples smooth out. The silence returns, but it's heavy now, pregnant with waiting. This is the job, not to win, but to endure. To stand between the town and the water and say, "Fay not tonight." Asterisk, I pour the rest of the coffee onto the gravel, a small offering to the earth. I cap the thermos and turn back to the cruiser. My reflection catches in the driver's side window. Tired eyes, gray stubble, a uniform that fits a little looser than it used to. For a split second, the reflection doesn't move when I do. It grins, sharp and wide. I blink, and it's just me again. I get in the car. I don't start the engine yet. I reach into the glove compartment and pull out the small, leather-bound notebook. The pages are warped from humidity, the ink slightly run. I open it to the last page and pick up a pen. I don't write a diary entry. I don't write about my feelings. I write the protocol for tomorrow night. The survival guide for a war of attrition. Fy Rule 1. Park facing away from the water until midnight. Asterisk Fay Rule 2. If you hear a voice you recognize, turn off the radio. Asterisk Fay Rule 3. Never acknowledge them by name. Asterisk Fay Rule 4. If the fog touches the tires, leave. Asterisk Fay Rule 5. The reflection is not your friend. Asterisk I close the book and slide it into my breast pocket, right over my heart. A paper shield. I start the engine. The headlights cut through the dark, two beams of solid reality in a world of fluid shadows. I put the car in gear and drive slowly back toward the main road, checking the rear-view mirror only once. The lake is still there, black and silent, waiting for me to slip up. I won't. Not tonight. I have the watch.